All right, we are already at week 4. I can't believe that we are halfway through all of this journey together. Just because we're halfway through doesn't mean we can do halfway effort. We're going to keep pushing through and be really strong and finish this out well. Today we're talking about a subject that for me is presently and has always been very hard. So no, I am not an expert. I'm going to share with you kind of where things have gone for me and, how I'm working on it still today. So we're talking about abuse and boundaries and dealing with abuse. So, there's a lot of different kinds of abuse. And inside of my story, I was really easily manipulated. I really believe that if somebody has chosen, it's a choice to cheat on you for whatever reason. I don't care the reason. If you're not happy, well, do you think your partner was happy? Like they didn't choose to cheat. So you've made a choice. You decided to do this. And so that choice alone will also come with having to lie to your partner to pull it off and to manipulate them. And so I would say it's pretty safe to say that most of us sitting here watching this have had those two things happen to them, which is quite an abusive and not loving or kind way to treat your partner for sure. And so for me, I was no exception. A lot of lying and manipulation for years and years and years, so that they could get away with that and I won't find out. And so what happened is I basically was just always told I wasn't enough. If you fill in the blank, I was told it. I was not cool enough. I was not pretty enough. I was not social enough. I was not fun enough. My taste in music was not good enough. Literally, constantly told things like that. And I believed it completely and totally. I would try all these things to try to make myself better and more fun. And nothing worked. And I just believed it. And I still catch myself like, wait, that's not true. Like things will come into my head. And it just sucks. And it's stuck with me for so long. And I'm like, well, I mean, how long are these little demons going to follow me? And I will tell you that I've fought, and most of them don't affect me from day to day, but a lot do. And it still creeps up. And so, another thing that happened to me a lot is it took me, because I felt like I just wasn't worthy, it would take me a long time to speak my mind. And that is what I still struggle with a lot. I will let things slide just because I don't feel like what I need to say is important enough, or like I might even just try to avoid a fight, for example, because it's not important enough. I can just deal with it later. I remember at one point, and I hadn't caught anything, and I just had this feeling and it just wouldn't go away. It took me 6 months, I kid you not, 6 months to get the guts up to ask my ex if he was cheating. And I didn't have any proof, and it just was this gut feeling. And literally at the end of the conversation, because, your partner knows you so well, they know your buttons, they know how to play you if they need to. I was sobbing at the end of the conversation and felt like crap and apologizing for ever thinking such a crazy thing. And I mean, I felt insane for thinking it. Totally crazy. I didn't know what gaslighting was at the time. That was definitely what was happening to me. And so today we're going to talk a lot about this, different types of abuse. I know Mello and Julia have a lot of input to give us. So I didn't realize what was going on with me. So we're going to first start and talk about what is abuse and the different types of abuse, but especially that we know physical abuse. That's more obvious to us. So we're going to talk a little more about the type of abuse that we, a betrayed partner, are feeling during and after an affair has been exposed. So I'll let whoever wants to jump in.
I can jump in. Okay. Yeah, I mean, it's such a huge thing, because I think like psychological and emotional abuse are really real things. in a lot of relationships, and we don't even recognize it. And that's one of the clear signs that we're being emotionally or mentally abused, when there's really wrong things in the relationship, but we think it's our fault, right? Like we think everything is our fault, and we think that we're always to blame. And so we don't actually realize this type of manipulation, because we're being manipulated, right? Like we're being altered. Manipulation is about altering something into a different state. And so we're being altered to believe, to distrust our thoughts and feelings and emotions, and to believe the other person. So any kind of abuse is about getting power over, right? Getting power over somebody else. And so, like you were saying, Melissa, like you were being manipulated into believing that you were crazy or wrong or weird. And one of the kind of key signs that there is emotional abuse is when we are actually feeling crazy, right? Like we're like, oh my gosh, I'm losing my mind. I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel totally chaotic. I feel totally crazy. And it's where we are disconnected from ourselves, and we are losing that trust in ourselves, losing our trust, like that gut feeling, like, like there's a difference between a gut and paranoia, right? Like if we don't actually know in the moment, a lot of the times we don't, I guess, no, that's not the right way to say it. But a lot of times we think like, how do I know the difference between a gut feeling and being paranoid? And the truth is that like, when it's a gut feeling, when it's just being kind of paranoid about something, you feel kind of paranoid, but when it's that gut feeling, it's like you cannot ignore it. And you know that something isn't right, but you're trying to tell yourself that you're being crazy, or that, that you're just like being paranoid, but you actually know that there's something that's not right. And so when it comes to emotional abuse and psychological abuse, there's so many things to look out for. If your partner is always undermining what you're saying, if they're saying like, oh, that's not true, or you're just overreacting, or you're just being silly, even if they're overtly lying, that's pretty obvious. If they are trying to make you doubt your own like actual perception, like the facts, like the facts are in front of you. This happened. This specific thing happened. I saw you. I read this. I like this. My senses, I experienced this, and now this person is convincing you that you were wrong. And that's what gaslighting is. Like Melissa made that statement about gaslighting. For those of you who might be new to the term gaslighting, basically it's about someone telling you that what you experienced with your senses, with your sight, with your hearing, like something that actually came was real, not just like an assumption or kind of a thought, or just something that's not tangible. But when something actually happened, and then that person is denying that it happened, they are lying point blank into your face and making you doubt your own reality. So those are abusive signs as well. If someone is anytime someone is making you try to doubt or second guess or distrust yourself in order to have power over you, trying to make you feel small, any kind of like, that's a little bit more obvious, any time of overt criticism or belittling or overt judgment or being nasty or mean to you to try and make you feel small. Because when you feel small and when you feel like a shell of yourself, when you just feel like you're just kind of, you've got nothing left, and you're just like reduced to this like shell version of yourself, you're very easy to manipulate. And you will be a lot more likely to believe what you are saying, a lot more open to their influence, because you don't trust yourself anymore. You don't actually even know what's right and wrong. And so that's a lot of the things to look out for when you find yourself second guessing yourself all the time. When you find yourself, like Melissa said, apologizing after you bring something up that upset you or that bothered you, or that you're, like your feeling is not okay, and you bring it up to the person and they twist it and turn it and make you apologize for even bringing it up in the first place. They take no responsibility. They won't acknowledge or admit anything. They won't deal with anything or face anything. Those are all manipulation and abusive tactics that people use when they are trying to have power.
I just made the most profound point. I'll never be able to replicate it again. Not really. So I see a lot of this happening with friends or people I've met in different groups. It's like literally the same thing is happening over and over again, just different people. But I basically hear people say, well, my spouse or my partner, it gets angry if I bring it up. It's too painful, or I need to get over it, um, or they just don't want me. They just don't want me to talk about it anymore. And so they're just putting their feelings away. Like, don't talk about it. We have to move on. If we're going to work on our relationship, we have to move on. Or they will play mind games, a lot of mind games with them. Leave them for somebody else, come back, oh, I'm so sorry. Or, like they just are constant. They know exactly what to say to you because they were with you. They know you. And so I see people constantly with these same questions, like, I don't know what to do. Like, he says this, she does this, I don't know. And so my advice that I keep seeing constantly, that I think really applies to most anybody in these situations of abuse where you don't know what's real and you don't know what's fake, and you don't know if you're being abused, because it's hard. I mean, Julia just went over a lot of things that are going to help you identify that. But when you're looking at someone else's words and you are emotionally invested in them, you may really love them still or have a family with them. This is a hard place to navigate. And so for me, where I've landed and where I just think we can consistently land is when you're looking at somebody else's words, they've proven themselves to lie and not be trustworthy, right? I mean, you have to lie to pull this off, unless it's like a one-time thing and you were drunk and woke up somewhere and your pants were over there. Like, if you're choosing this, then you're lying. And so you have shown me that your words don't have a whole lot of value. Like, it's a bunch of lip service. And so where I look when you're trying to see, like, if somebody really cares, like if I did this to somebody I loved, I would let them do anything they wanted to. They could talk about their feelings. They could ask me stuff. They could anything they wanted, because if I was really sorry, like whatever they needed was never, I would never question it and let them do that. And so if the person that's hurt you isn't doing that, that's a red flag. Another thing is, we don't want to hear any words. We do not need lip service. But what I want to see is your actions. Because if I can see consistent actions that really show me, like, don't talk about it, be about it. I always say it's like a cheesy slogan from like high school or something. But don't talk about it, be about it. Because I want to see that your actions show me what you actually are saying for a very long time. Like, if your partner has a struggle with alcohol and they abuse that, like, don't just say you need me to become, like, you need me to help you become sober again. No, you don't. You can get sober and you can show me you're sober for a very long time. And then we can work on that. Your actions have to prove yourself. So people get very confused about this because they don't realize being abused because they're so tied into this person. So I really want to look at their actions. And if you have to tie yourself, like freaking Odyssey, when they heard the siren song and they had to tie themselves to the boat so they didn't like die, tie yourself to a freaking piece of furniture and don't listen to them when they talk. Only look at their words or their actions, not their words. And so that way you can really start to identify and see where abuse is and what is real, because that's hard to see where, what is real. So I guess now we've kind of seen a little bit about what is abuse and some things to kind of help us filter that. What can we do to boundaries? What the heck are boundaries, and what can we do to set them and enforce them to protect ourselves?
Boundaries is something that I think that when we love someone, is a very hard thing to even hear and acknowledge, especially when an affair, when a betrayal happens of that magnitude. All boundaries go out the window. You'll kind of go through this phase of like, well, I can fix it. Or again, maybe if I was prettier, thinner, smarter, whatever that buildup has become. And a lot of times in a lot of scenarios, you that may be watching it, there's a lot of isolation that goes on. You're kept from the people that love you because usually your spouse doesn't want you to be told, hey, this isn't healthy, or what's wrong with this. So I think that it's very, very important, if you're still in the relationship, again, understand that abuse comes in all forms. A lot of times with my second husband, I would say, well, he doesn't hit me, but he yells. He yells at me all the time, like from the time I would wake up in the morning until the time I would go to sleep at night. And believe it or not, even after I became a therapist, I realized, wow, that's a form of abuse or isolation, like I mentioned before. So again, even though it may not be stereotypical, or it's not textbook, or they're not beating you, God willing, they're not beating you, physically beating you, that emotional abuse takes a toll. So when you find out about the relationship that's going on, the betrayal, that huge kind of basically disaster that's occurred, your sense of fight or flight, it all goes out the window. And you sometimes will say, I can't have boundaries because I'm going to fix this. And so what you have to do is, again, simple, which you have to ask yourself, if there's a list of abusive behaviors, and if it's one or more that they've done on that list, that means that you're in an abusive situation, period, end of story. And so the way to start with the boundary is to understand that this person, if having an affair, has sat there and lied to you and disrupted your family unit. And so they're not going to stop. You have to be the one to say, uncle. You have to be the one to say, okay, I can no longer allow this. That seems like a lot right now. So let's compartmentalize it to, okay, the boundary for me is I no longer will have a discussion with you if you're yelling and screaming at me. My mother or my father or my loved one is not off limits. And so when you start to create these small micro boundaries that, again, for most people that are not in the situations that you or I have been in, because I've been in that situation as well, when you create these micro boundaries, it will give you the courage and build that muscle. Let's call it your boundary muscle, to build up bigger boundaries where I'm like, homeboy, you're not coming back in the house, or homegirl, you're not coming back in because it's not okay what you did. You can't stay out all night and then think you're going to come home while I go to work and you're going to say, well, I'm taking care of the kids. That will allow you to create those bigger boundaries. And then those boundaries is, okay, this is what I need to either A, get out of the relationship, or B, stay in the relationship. That's on you. I mean, I can't make that decision for you. What I can do, though, is help you to build that boundary muscle. I'm sure Julia can as well, and so can Melissa, to build that muscle of boundary where you understand that when you create those micro boundaries, that you are giving yourself permission to take ownership, like Julia had mentioned earlier, of trusting yourself again, where what feels good. And listen, 99.9% of the time, from the time I was 5 years old, my mom would tell me, if the stove is hot, don't touch the top of the stove. You'll burn yourself. So it took me maybe once or twice, and I'm a stubborn girl. I'm a Leo. I'm a stubborn girl. I'd stick my hand on the stove when I was like, Mom, it's not going to burn me. And so after I had, and I'm not joking, I had a 3rd degree burn on the side because like I kept touching the stove and getting burned and having to go to the hospital and really treating the burn. I learned that if you touch the hot stove, you're going to get burned. So you have to understand, building that muscle, you're creating your sense of boundary again, because someone has come in and created their idea of what boundary is. And so you're right now, your equilibrium, your sense is off. You don't know what's right, what's wrong. Why are these women sitting here telling me about boundaries? And he tells me, or she tells me that this boundary isn't necessary in our relationship. They don't know our relationship. And you're right, we don't. But what I do know is, let's help you build that boundary muscle by creating micro boundaries. So what feels good to you? What do you think is normal? Do you think it's normal? Or withholding sex is a huge, huge red flag. If he or she is withholding intimacy in the relationship, that's a power play. That's an abusive thing. So what you have to do is say to that person, this is my boundary, or let's go get you tested. Let's go get you tested for STDs, because that gut that I have, that feeling that I have in my gut, that gut feeling I have, I believe that it's relevant. And so once you, again, maintain your own safety, that's building your boundary muscle. And I know that it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to talk about intimacy, but it's necessary, because if intimacy is involved in the manipulation and the boundaries, your physical health is at risk. And that is contracting an STD. That is worried about homeboy or homegirl going out there and getting strange love. And they're not wearing, what did they say, glove for love, or whatever you say. They're not protecting themselves appropriately. And all joking aside, I know I can be a little bit cheeky, and I apologize. I'm not trying to, but I want to talk to you in very simple terms that you understand. And if you don't think it can happen to you, it can happen. It does happen. 1 out of 4 Americans in our country every minute of the day contract an STD. 83% of those people are from our own spouses. They're facts. Go on census.org. Those are facts. So I don't say this to scare you or to like freak you out. I say this because I want to help you build that boundary muscle. And I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. But the good news is that we can create the boundaries that work for you. And you don't have to do it all today. You don't have to get it all done today. Like, listen, Melissa's a little bit of an overachiever, we know, and she wants you to get that homework done. But we're giving you time to do your homework. And really, the homework is for you to take in every step of your life, every single day. That's a boundary for you. That's your boundary muscle. I'm going to do my homework because I'm worth it. And homeboy and homegirl, they can wait. And if homeboy or homegirl want love, they're going to have to go get an STD test. And those are boundaries that you can set up for yourself today that can save your life.
And I think a lot of, oh, no, sorry, Mel.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think a lot of it too, a lot of us don't really we hear the word boundary and we're like, what does that mean? Like, how do I know where my boundaries are, let alone how to set them, right? Because it's so confusing. Like, how do I know what's okay with me and what's not okay with me? And a lot of it is learning how to tune in when something doesn't feel right. When we're being triggered, or when something is like emotions are coming up for us and we don't do anything about it. We don't say anything. We don't draw those lines in the sand and say, not okay, or this is what I need you to do, or this is what my expectation is. And I mean, that can get into a little bit of muddy waters, because boundaries aren't about changing other people. Boundaries are about saying, this is what's okay with me and this is what's not okay with me. And it's your choice whether or not it's your choice what you do, but it's my choice what I do based on what you're choosing to do. Does that make sense? So you can do whatever you want. You can choose not to go to get the test. You can choose to go out till late at night and not call me, but then it's my choice about whether or not I'm going to be here when you get home. It's my choice about whether or not I'm going to start to trust you more. It's my choice about whether or not I'm going to be intimate with you. So those are my lines in the sand. This is what's okay with me, this is what's not okay with me. And the way to know, like I said a second ago, the way to know where our boundaries are is anytime you feel like you want to say something, or that something doesn't feel right, or that you want to ask something of someone, but you hold back and you don't, that is allowing that person to cross that boundary. That is allowing that person to violate that space. If you think about, like, you have this yard, and you have this house on a piece of property, and you have this front yard, and there's no fence, there's nothing there, then, and no one really knows where the line is between sort of those first few feet of like city property and your actual property line. So they're just coming in and they're letting their dog crap on your lawn, and they're using your hose, and they're taking your things, and they're just doing it because they don't know where the line is. And so it's up to you to put up that picket fence and say, this is what's mine. And if you want to come into my space, then these are the rules. Then this is what the expectation is. And that's where my boundary is. And so sometimes, like we were talking about with that abuse, people who are trying to be manipulative, you have a partner who's being manipulative or abusive, they're going to try and tell you, well, you're not allowed to have that boundary. Well, you're not allowed to say that. You're not allowed to do that. And it's like, well, yes, I absolutely am. You don't have to comply to it. You don't have to do what I want you to do, but I'm telling you, if you want to come into my space, these are the rules. And you don't have to like it, and you don't have to do it, but if you don't, you're not welcome into my space. And back to what Mela was saying a few minutes ago too, is that feeling of like, I need to make it better. You know, that feeling of like, I need to fix it. And that is a huge red flag. If someone has betrayed you, if someone has breached your trust, if someone has injured the relationship, and you're the one thinking that like, I need to do something to fix this, and the other person is just sort of going on their merry way and telling you that you're overreacting, or that you're making a big deal out of things, or that, you know, you shouldn't be feeling the way you're feeling, like those are huge red flags. And like Melissa said at the beginning, that if the relationship is going to get repaired, then the partner has to be coming back and rebuilding that trust. Right? Like that, an affair is a total breach of trust. And that's all you have in a relationship. Like all we have with another human being is trust. We have no guarantees, and we have no control. We can't control somebody else. So as soon as they break that trust, that's a huge injury to the relationship. And so then it is like, they do need to be the one that's coming back and trying to repair that breach, not you feeling like, oh my gosh, it's up to me now to fix everything, while my partner just goes off and does whatever he or she wants, and leaves me sitting here feeling like it's all my fault. Those are some big red flags to look out for. Those are some huge violations to be mindful of. And so really just kind of looking at like, what am I thinking or feeling? Tuning into that, checking in with that. What am I thinking or feeling right now? And if I ask myself honestly, is this okay? Is this okay? Should I be thinking that this is all my fault? Should I be thinking that it's up to me to fix it? Should I be thinking that I'm this bad person, or that I, like Melissa said, that I need to be more this way in order to earn my partner's loyalty? Right? So really trying to, and it's hard when we're in the waters are muddied. And it's hard to know like what's right side up, what's upside down. But I think that if we are just checking in with ourselves when something doesn't feel right, chances are it's not. Where there's smoke, there's fire.
So true. And one thing I had to learn, and I feel like I've really got it under control now, is control. I had to learn that I'm a fixer, I'm a doer. I want to make it all better. And I realized I couldn't control anybody else but me. And I say it to myself all the time. I only have control over myself. I only control my reactions. I only control what I do. And so when you're doing this, and, I encourage you to actually write down what your boundaries are. Like, how do you need to be treated? What is ideal for you? What is totally not okay with you? And write it down. And, that way you cannot go back, like, this is what it is. These are my boundaries. And realize that you can't control it. A big problem after this happens and you realize that everything's been a lie is you get into like freak out zone, and you start watching their emails, checking their accounts, and looking on their phone, and you do all this stuff because you're so afraid. I did it, but I had permission to do it, but like I shouldn't have, because it just took me into like crazy zone. So realizing that, you know, it's so hard, because if you say, I can't control them, but then they lie and you don't know if they're actually doing what you've asked of them, you know, in some situations, like you don't know that they're being faithful still if you're still, you know, together. So that's a really hard place to go, because some boundaries are very obvious. Don't scream at me. Okay, I know when you're doing that. I know when you're not. Don't cheat on me. That's harder to know, you know? And so that's where I feel like if you try to go down that awful, terrible bunny rabbit hole of, you know, following them and stalking them, it's so bad for your heart. So I encourage you not to do it, but I encourage you to be very, very, very stern and firm about your boundaries. Give them to your partner if that's still something you're pursuing. And with all relationships, friendships, you know, children, family, like, this is how we treat each other, and I will do this and you will do this. And if we can't do that, it's not healthy anymore. And so that's our homework for this week, is to actually write down what our boundaries are, and decide in your heart and write it freaking down. Like, this is what happens if you can't operate inside of this, and you have to do it. Like, it's terrifying. And especially if you're in a situation where there's children involved, because you're not making a decision just for yourself, you're making a decision for your whole family and for forever, probably. So this is so important, hard and important work to do. So definitely, don't skip this, work on this. And this is going to be a lifetime thing, of just, this is how I am to be treated, because I am worthy and I deserve it. And we're just going to go forward like that. All right. So we're going to see you guys next week, and jump into some more good affair recovery work. All right. Bye, guys.